All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Detroit chapter of the Society for Financial Service Professionals. My name is Ryan Merrier. I'm our current president, and we're going to share our screen here. Everybody can see that okay?
Yep.
All right. I'd like to start off by welcoming everyone and saying thank you to our wonderful sponsors who we have up on the screen right now, the AR Law Group, Cousins Lansky, Attorneys and Counselors, the law firm of Gianmarco, Mullins and Horton, Mass Mutual Great Lakes. These are our platinum sponsors. We'll have upcoming meetings with each of these in the new year. And thank you to our gold sponsor, Fenner, Mellstrom and Dooling, the CPA firm in Birmingham, as well as Landmark Financial Planning and Advisory, our silver sponsor. So today, our meeting is with Abby Donnelly. I want to thank her for coming and joining us a little early this morning. Cool. There we are. I'd like to, again, welcome her on behalf of FSP Detroit. Abby does regular speaking events nationwide. As some of you might have heard, she is an FSP member. I'll let her tell you about her chapter, hopefully during her presentation. She's the founder of the Leadership and Legacy Group, where they are succession and exit planning specialists. They work closely with business owners and C-suite level leaders. Wow. She is passionate about identifying and leveraging strengths to enhance performance for both individuals and their companies. She has expertise in developing strong leaders who can run the company profitably and sustainably, as well as facilitating the strategic planning process to accelerate growth, build implementation systems, and align the organization, and establishing an individual roadmap to a meaningful and rewarding next career or next chapter or retirement or whatever the business owner has in mind. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Abby. She's got a presentation prepared. It will be followed with a Q&A, and we'll hopefully wrap up before lunchtime. So if we could all put your microphones on mute. We'll have questions at the end. You can, of course, use the chat feature if there's something that you'd like to put in without speaking up. And I will also look for hand raising at the end too. So I'm going to turn this over to Abby now.
All right, so thank you so much. And with the chat feature, I can't seem to find how to get that up on my screen while everything else is up. So if you've got questions or you want to chime in with some comments, please just unmute and jump in. It won't bother me at all.
Abby, I'll watch the chat feature if there happens to be something in there for you.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. So thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about being with you today. I want to start by sharing with you some of what my business owner clients are telling me. So my business owner clients are telling me that I'm worried that my business won't survive. I'm running out of cash. They tell me that I'm afraid that I'm going to have to lay off half of my staff, and we don't have the bench strength without them. I'm afraid to invest because the future is just so uncertain. We're going to have to pivot, but I just don't know what to pivot to. Our productivity is down, and I just don't know how we're going to figure out how to get productivity up with everybody working from home. It changes the whole dynamic of how we work together. My staff is exhausted. We're working around the clock. And so as I'm listening to all of these questions, it is very clear that we are all facing a massive amount of uncertainty. And so the uncertainty that we're facing do, of course, with the pandemic, and that has created a dynamic where many people are working from home. There's the economic implications that I know all of you are very, very familiar with. We've also been facing racial equity discussions, which I think have been greatly needed and are now coming to the forefront. EEOC concerns, political divisiveness, and as I mentioned, not only are many of us and our employees working from home, but we're also schooling our kids from home. And so the demands on our family life have gotten much more significant. So let me tell you a little bit about my background. Ryan did a great introduction. My background before the Leadership and Legacy Group was I was a partner at Sandler Training, and I started my own company prior to that called Strategic Choices, and it was a management training and consulting firm. My early career was with Procter & Gamble. So I worked in a number of different locations. I was a global consultant. I was in manufacturing management. And I got there after my graduate degree at the University of Florida, where I got my master's in statistics. And that is the degree that got me into SFSP. So I've got a bachelor's in math from State University of New York at Albany. My business, the Leadership and Legacy Group, as Ryan said, work with business owners to develop their leaders so that they can run the business profitably and sustainably. And I do a lot of facilitation of strategic plans and difficult conversations. And I work with folks developing their next chapter. As I go through the program today, I'd like to invite you to think about how can this apply to me? So get out a pen and a piece of paper, and as we're going through, even if some of the strategies I'm sharing don't feel like they're going to apply, I'd invite you to challenge yourself to figure out how they might. And I'd invite you also to think about this at two levels. One is what applies to you, and then as importantly, what might apply to some of your clients, because that's really what this is targeted for. So the question is, what do your clients need now? And plan A obviously isn't working. And so you're going to have to help them figure out what is plan B going to be. So what I want to do today is set the stage for you on a range of different strategies to help your clients or you survive and thrive, and really try to think a little bit more creatively, maybe than we do in our normal day-to-day lives, about new solutions that might help your clients. So we'll go through that, and as Ryan said, we'll do some Q&A at the end. Okay, so let's start with a first set of strategies. So I know all of you are very comfortable with the idea that in any business, cash is king. And so you've got to figure out how do you preserve cash, and then how can you get the company at least to break even. So I want to talk a little bit about some things that you can do to help your clients preserve cash. And many of you probably are familiar with these strategies before, but sometimes hearing them again might trigger some new ideas. So you might want to do a cash analysis with them. And that cash analysis might look at, first of all, what's their current cash position? And then secondly, what are their absolute bare bones needs? Of course, every bit of cash can extend the life of the company, but helping them understand how much runway they have and where they can bring in cash now can be a really effective strategy. And when our clients are in the midst of all of this uncertainty, they're not often thinking as clearly as they can when they're going about their day-to-day business. So some ideas that I'll toss out is, do they have equipment that they're no longer using that could be sold to bring in cash? I have a client who had some equipment that was in storage on their site, and pulled it out of storage, cleaned it up a little bit, and was able to sell it at a reasonable price to a company that needed it for production. So it's a manufacturing situation. Can they sell off inventory that they're not using? One of the examples that really caught my attention was when we were going into the summer for the pandemic, all the PPP was needed. Well, there were a couple of laboratories that made the news on college campuses because they had all kinds of PPE that their students weren't able to use because they weren't in class. And they weren't going to be back in class until at the earliest September. And many were going to be out of class live or in person long beyond that. So the laboratories ended up either donating or selling their PPE equipment to hospital systems and doctors' offices. So thinking about companies might use the same materials, going back to your supplier and asking if the supplier would take the materials back or equipment back, even if it's at a discount, it might still be worth it. Slowing down the payments to vendors, renegotiating payment terms, renegotiating delivery costs, renegotiating the lease extensions. Other ideas include subleasing warehouse space or office or production space. I have a client that had 2 facilities, and based on their production requirements, really only needed 1, and was able to, effective January, is subleasing their space. And it's a huge relief because the cash flow shift from that was tremendous. Whoops. So those are some ideas on how to get cash. The other piece is around how do you help them pay faster. So, some obvious ideas include things like taking credit cards, asking for a down payment up front, offering some sort of incentive for them to pay faster, collecting on the front end versus the back end. I set up my business years ago where I collect money on the front end of every month worth of coaching. And that's just been, sort of a standard practice for me. And I'm so relieved now because it helps from a cash flow standpoint. Invoicing sooner. One of the things that I learned that was amazing, and I know many of you probably know this already, but if you invoice faster, then generally speaking, people pay faster. I love that. And then, of course, talking to your bank, helping them talk to their bank about getting some consolidated loans or interest rates or something like that. Another idea is looking at labor costs. And as you all know, labor is often the biggest expense for most companies. And so can you do some things or help them do some things around a shorter work week? Or if they're a retail organization, can they reduce their hours to when people are actually showing up? Can you offer part-time work or unpaid leave? A lot of the articles that I've been reading about women in the workplace in the last couple of months are saying that women are opting out of the workplace or going to part-time work because they're having to shoulder a lot more of the childcare responsibilities and the schooling than they had to in the past. And so there's a little bit of a reduction in the career path for women that's starting now because of the pandemic. So, can you offer folks a break there where whether male or female, they can take some of that time and invest it with their family? Is now a time to offer a sabbatical? It's maybe not a great time for people to do a sabbatical, but it could be a good time to offer one. Can you have them pause their retirement contributions? I know a lot of companies are looking at that right now, and when things can come back, reinstating them, which is fine. And then reducing pay. I know nobody likes to reduce pay, but sometimes, especially if you think it's going to be short-term for cash flow purposes, doing a tiered reduction where you're reducing pay for the top folks at a higher percentage than you're reducing pay for folks that are lower in the pay scale. So things like that can also help on a cash standpoint. The next strategy is all about getting super creative around leveraging assets. I'm a big fan of doing an inventory. And so I'm going to talk through inventory assessment around talent. What kind of skills and experience do you have? We're going to look at equipment. We're going to look at materials, and we're going to look at space. And those are generally the largest buckets of assets that we have. So if you start with an inventory and you challenge every single bit of asset that you have, then let's start by looking at talent or skills. So are there ways that you can farm your talent out? Could you have your talent be paid, but have them work for your suppliers? So your suppliers are picking up the bill, excuse me. Could you have them work for your customers? Maybe they have a skill set that your customers could pay them for because your customers need the work, but they don't have the talent to support it. Even competitors, if they're non-local, could you share some of your talent, especially in a remote world? Sometimes you can share your talent with competitors. There's a risk associated with that, of course. They may love your talent and hire them away. But sometimes it's worth thinking creatively. When I was at Procter & Gamble, one of the things that I was exposed to there that I never would have thought of doing was we ended up sharing our talent at times with our suppliers. So we would sometimes send our employees down to our suppliers' plant to work on the line for a couple of weeks at a time. And it was great experience for our employees, but it also helped our suppliers out a lot when staffing was low. And of course, there's a learning curve associated with it, but it ended up being great. Other examples that come to mind, restaurants are struggling a lot, but some restaurants could maybe do a better job of either breaking even or making money if they could do more shift work, if they could stay open later or open earlier in the morning. And so, could the staff of one company, one restaurant, support another restaurant in the off hours if their restaurant businesses shut down? In Greensboro, several of our restaurants just shut down for the 6 months of the pandemic, but they could have shipped out their staff to support other 24-hour operation restaurants, as an example. So doing an inventory of skills and experience also can highlight some examples of redistributing the work within your company, taking people out of slow areas and having them work on bottlenecks to increase the flow of the production. And production doesn't necessarily mean manufacturing. It could be production of service. One of the companies that I work with decided that they would take somebody that was in engineering and move them into a sales role, because their biggest bottleneck was they couldn't get enough sales in the door. And so it's worked out really well. They've actually brought in some really nice business for the company, and they didn't have needs in engineering at the time, but they certainly needed to sell. You can ensure that the folks that have the critical skills are focusing on the critical work that they do. And then folks that have skills that are not as critical to the organization may be cross-trained to use those skills in other areas. One of the other ideas is to rehire if sales is an issue, for example, rehire a past employee that left on good terms, that was a good employee, who may be out of work right now, since so many people are out of work, and have them come back on a commission-only basis. One of my clients explored that option with one of his past salespeople and looked at some ways that they could get him back in on a commission basis to sell, because he knew the business, he knew what to do, and he left on good terms. So next, let's look at equipment. And so assets that you have in equipment, we talked a little bit about, can you sell or donate inventory? Can you repurpose inventory? One of the fun stories that I read recently was a wedding dress company. This is a super high-end wedding dress designer. And she realized that there were no weddings that were happening. And the few weddings that there were, most people weren't, it wasn't the fancy wedding. So her production dropped dramatically. So she had all this inventory, and she started making really pretty masks out of the wedding fabric. And she's been selling them, and they sell at a premium, but they're beautiful. And so people are buying them. Others that I'm sure that you've seen are people turning vodka into sanitizer. So lots of folks are looking at those kinds of things. You could look at going just in time and creating some sort of overnight delivery using a supply chain asset that you have. If your clients need more capacity, could they take that production to a customer's, a supplier's, or a competitor's office? In Greensboro, we have some friendly competitors, and the idea that you might have your production running on their idle lines on a second or third shift is not that far-fetched. So likewise, if you've got excess capacity, whether it's service capacity or manufacturing capacity, could you invite other companies in to use your production and or your people to run that business? It keeps your equipment running, which anyone that's been in manufacturing and is looking at equipment knows that the more it runs, the better it runs. So you want to keep it operating, and it brings in revenue. So could if you're in a call center, could you pick up call center work from another company and keep your people working second shift, third shift, things like that? If we look at space as an asset, we talked about leasing excess space to another company. Other things that could be creative in Greensboro, we have a couple of hotels that obviously are not anywhere close to capacity, and they've offered up their hotel rooms on certain floors to our homeless population. And that's been a really neat way of getting folks not only off the streets, but someplace safe and where they can get meals. And so the cost to everybody, the hotels are getting pay for it, and the folks that are homeless are getting a better opportunity to reset and to build a life from a home, at least for the foreseeable future. Other examples, if a restaurant is shut down, could their kitchen be used as a food incubator to get startups some space to try out some new foods and to get a new business operating? Or as a volunteer kitchen, over the summer, I'm sure that it's probably similar in Detroit. In Greensboro, we have a super high, an embarrassingly high level of poverty. And so there are a lot of kids that don't have meals every day. And so creating a volunteer kitchen where you can prepare foods for kids that don't have food to eat. So those are some space examples. And of course, the question always when we look at labor on people's minds is, do we have to do layoffs? And of course, layoffs are gut-wrenching for everybody. We know that as business owners, they're gut-wrenching for the owners, but they're also, of course, traumatic for not only the folks that are let go, but the folks that have to stay and pick up the work. So if your clients are thinking about layoffs, some of the things to encourage them to think about, if they're not already, are what are the critical skills required to produce? And I think most owners are going to be thinking of that. But what I found with the clients that I work with is that sometimes they're not also thinking about what are the skills that are needed to recover quickly. Because when this pandemic is behind us, and I sure can't wait for that moment when the pandemic is behind us, but I think all of us that have survived it are going to want to figure out what are the skills that I need to recover quickly and make that happen. So things like, that list of skills, and then keeping in touch with the employees that had those skills that have been laid off. And just reminding them also to be careful not to make promises that they can't keep. I think as owners, we want to take really good care of our people. And even if we have to let them go, we want them to know that we want them back as soon as the work is there. But you also have to be careful not to make promises they can't keep. And I guess the last one on this is just reminding them that it's okay to lean on others, that, all of us are facing this level of uncertainty. And, you as their trusted advisor can do a lot to assuage their stress level. You can talk to them about having a plan in place and feeling that kind of support. You can listen when they need a listening ear to talk to. So don't forget the important role that you play in being that sounding board for them, and that support and that trusted, credible advisor that continues to remind them that they have what they need to make it through this if they're in survival mode. And even if they're thriving, there are a lot of companies that are doing extremely well right now, and they need to have that listening ear to say, hey, keep going. Next strategies are around making a pivot. And again, it's about being really creative about this. And so, the question for owners is, can they pivot their business short term to meet some sort of global, possibly some sort of national, or some regional or local urgent need? And there are a lot of urgent needs out there. The obvious one is the demand for PPE, for ventilators, masks, sanitizer, cleaning products. But even signage has been a need. You've probably noticed, I can say it's true for here, but you've probably noticed when you go to the grocery store and when you go to other, Target or any of those kinds of stores, that there are signs all over the place that show you where 6 feet apart is and tell you that masks are required. And most people want a professional looking sign, so even signage has become an urgent need. So anyone that can produce any of those things can grow, can at least salvage their business, if not grow it through a pivot. Other ways of pivoting might include delivery. I was reading an article in our business journal last night that said that the demand for delivery service during the pandemic has just skyrocketed. And we already had quite a lot being delivered, whether it was food delivery to your home or it was Amazon, delivering regularly through FedEx or Postal Service or UPS. But there's just a lot more delivery now at the grocery stores, and with other things that we never thought we'd be ordering online because we could just go to the store and get it. So companies that have either access to supply chain delivery or can pivot to that, can benefit. The other pivot opportunity is offering a product or service that's trending that won't go back. I think about the whole work from home movement, and that's been a massive shift. And many companies are saying that they're never going back to working in the office. I've been reading about Google and some companies like that are saying it's not just that we're going to be working from home through January, it's that we're going to be working from home from wherever. So people have the opportunity now to work and live wherever they want because their home office is their, is where they're going to go. So thinking about what is the technology or training. So, SFSP has gone virtual. Almost every chapter that I know is doing virtual work. Ours is, obviously you are. And so what are some products and services that can support virtual businesses? The other example around a pivot or around a new trend is, many of us are stuck at home. And we may be stuck at home because that's where we're working from right now. We may be stuck at home because that's where our kids are and we need to support them at school. But one of the ideas that I thought about that a company could do is a surprise subscription model. So you have maybe one for adults and one for kids. And the idea would be that every month, the company sends you a surprise box that shows up at your door. And it's all based on, what are you doing to work from home? And so anyway, those kinds of things I think can be exciting. The next one is around getting creative and marketing and messaging differently. So can you reposition your business using your competitive advantage? Can you source differently? Can you market via webinar? Can you market via social media? Can you reposition the product that you offer to a different market than typically used it, because now that market is in demand? Can you set up some strategic alliances that you hadn't thought about before? So for example, if restaurants are doing a ton of takeouts are packaged in bags and containers. So is there a target market that you want to go after that a restaurant that's doing a lot of takeout service would also serve? And could you put your flyers in their takeout containers so that when the person gets home, they open their takeout container and boom, there's you or your customers, their flyer or their business information. So those are some different ideas around messaging and marketing differently. Can you get creative around how they deliver their product or their service? Is there a new way to go virtual or digital? Can you go to online subscription content? One of the companies that I've worked with, a former client of mine, had a training company, and they sent their trainers all over the country and all over the world trying to figure out doing the training. And then when the pandemic hit, all the travel shut down. People weren't sending their folks to live in-person trainings. And so they had to pivot dramatically. And they basically reinvented their entire business as a subscription business online, offering webinars and programming, both in-house to that particular client, but also to a larger market. And they've done extremely well in a very short period of time. Food trucks. If you can't do a restaurant, you can do a food truck and get your food out to people, because outside is safer than in dining. So those are some ideas around getting creative there. Can they establish new habits of working with them? One of mine would be under a replenishment model where cleaning products would be delivered to my house every month, or pizza would show up on Friday night. I wouldn't have to think, what do I want to have for dinner tonight? Every Tuesday I get delivery of fried chicken, and every Wednesday I get delivery of pizza or something like that. Telehealth is a new habit that doctors are establishing. You don't have to leave your house to see the doctor. It's quick and easy, and in many cases very effective. Things like that. So the next one is focus on talent. So we need to support our people in this process. And with many of our folks working from home, there's not only a need to check in more often, so, touch base with people, see how they're doing, but we're alone a lot more. And so a couple of the tips that I read that were interesting around enhancing your culture while everyone is working from home is to pick a time, 10 o'clock in the morning or something, and we're all going to Zoom, but we're going to keep Zoom on while we're doing our work. And so if people want to have those, casual conversations, they just have them in the Zoom room while they're doing their work. And folks have tried that for an hour and it's really helped their culture. Other things that I know people are doing is having some fun with a happy hour. 5 o'clock, everyone moves online to Zoom and they have a virtual happy hour. Maybe get an adult beverage or something like that. Setting up home delivery service for your folks that are working super hard. Bankers, when they were going through the PPP loan crush, they ended up, some of my clients ended up getting home food deliveries, from one of their favorite restaurants to say, thank you so much for working your tail off during this time. Laundry pickup, restaurant takeout, things like that. Other talent things that you can do is assigning people work that'll give them a specific experience or a specific skill building opportunity, cross training, online training, reading a book together and discussing it in a Zoom meeting, connecting with your customers proactively, creating some small project teams that they can work on to improve the business. And then the last one is, we talked earlier about hiring skills. The last one is this might be a good time to release any poor performers that aren't going to be able to grow with the company. So we've got two more pieces here. One is invest in infrastructure. And we know that systems form the foundation for a healthy and a fast recovery. So, can you start them working on value added projects that have been on the back burner? Now might be a really good time to take those out. Working on profit improvement teams, documenting the systems that make your business successful. I've got some clients right now that are really taking the opportunity to go through and flowchart their systems so that everybody knows the way that it works and they can get people up to speed faster when they need to hire. So investing in the infrastructure, I think, could be a really powerful thing. And then the last one is it time for an outside investor? Is this the time to bring in somebody? It gives you an infusion of cash. It may give you an infusion of skills. And it may also create some new strategic direction. So that's the first piece of it. And then, for many of my clients, they're asking the other question, which is this a really good time to make an acquisition? I've got a number of clients that are thinking that, making an acquisition now would be fantastic. They've got the cash and they can get a business at what they think is a fair price, and they can offer value in terms of extending the legacy of the seller. So, anyway, thinking about those kinds of things, it might be a good time to ask those questions. So I want to close with a quick tip from my book, 128 Tips, number 45, Finding Your Courage. So during times of stress, we often look to great leaders to model for us how to rise above challenges. But I recently found this quote, which reminds us that sometimes we can best meet challenges in this way. Courage does not always roar. Sometimes it is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I'll try again tomorrow. That's by Marianne Radmacher. So my closing is help them, and for you, find your courage and try again tomorrow. So I will pause here. I've got a newsletter I'd love to get anyone to sign up for. It's a weekly leadership tip, and it's about as quick as the one I just shared with you. And I've also got some other resources on my website that I'd be happy to share, and like 30 things you can do to develop your people, and 9 subscription methods that John Warlow has in his book, The Automatic Customer. I've got a PDF of that. So I'll take any questions and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay, I guess at this time we will take any questions that we might have. Feel free to unmute yourself, throw something in the chat box, or I guess you could send a message privately if you want to do that as well. Abby, I've got a comment from one of our board members that was on the line, Natalia Gentry. She said that she loved this, very creative ideas, where most companies are hitting a wall at this point on how to improve employee culture. And she also said, "Go Gators." Her husband is MBA from Florida.
She probably can't see me doing my Gator movement. Excellent, thank you.
Abby, that was a great presentation. Really, obviously, it looks like your company's like a think tank, and you're always thinking about innovation and ways to help your clients. Would my assumption be that more of your work is maybe on a fee-based? Are you doing more? Is it more of a fee-based arrangement that you have with your people, your clients?
When you say fee-based, what does that mean?
Well, okay. Well, maybe I just need to clarify. Is your firm, are you working in an advisory capacity at all, or as a financial advisor, or are you contracting yourself and your services with your clients?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I only work on the leadership side of succession and exit, and I do not do any financial side of it at all. So I don't do any financial advising. I don't do any CPA work. I don't do any cash analysis. That is not my area of expertise. But for me, this kind of work is what you all do exceptionally well. And that's why I was excited to present, because I think it's stuff that plays to all of your strengths, and you're probably doing a lot of it already.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Abby, we have a question from the chat. If any specific tips specifically in the financial, since many of us on the call are in the financial planners, financial advisors, any specific tips for the financial advisors and their practices?
Well, I think one of the things that that financial advisors may not be as conscious of, because I'm not a financial advisor, but I have a lot of clients that are financial advisors, and I know a lot through our chapter, because we have a number of financial advisors as well. One of the things that I think financial advisors may undervalue in themselves is the credibility and the respect that their clients have for them in a bigger pool than just their investment strategy. The folks that I know will tell me, the clients will tell me about what they want to talk to their financial advisor about, and the financial advisors will tell me that the advisors try to stay in their lane. But what I find is that the advisors can be such a strong support mechanism from a credibility, from a confidence, from a assuredness standpoint in a bigger pool than they're having. So what my advice would be, don't hesitate to ask the questions like I'm asking today of your clients, even if you don't know the answers, because what you can do is bring in other resources that can help them that don't conflict with what you bring them, but they already see you as their trusted advisor. So bring it in and take advantage, not in a negative way, take appropriate advantage of the fact that you already have that credible, trusted relationship.
Abby, I may have one more question. Have you seen examples of collaboration, for example, as an advisor, financial advisor, reaching out to the accounting and the legal professionals in your area to kind of bring synergies or strategies to clients that may be helpful?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I see a lot of that, and I think it's so powerful. If you can get the owner past the concept of I'm paying all these people individually, then what I've seen is that the synergy between them can be phenomenal. And so the two problems that crop up is getting the owner past the belief of the payment. And of course, for fee-based financial planners, there's not really that same concern because they're paying you for assets under management, right? And so not paying a fee for your hourly rate. And I think most financial advisors that I know would be happy to sit down with a CPA or an attorney or something like that to help the business owner engage in ways to grow their business. The more the business grows, the more money there's going to be for them to give to you to invest for them. So it's a good strategy. But what I have seen is that the second issue is that sometimes those advisors are uncomfortable sitting in a room because they're afraid that they may their credibility may be harmed or something like that. But any advisor that I've run into that is competent and credible is excited about the opportunity to sit down in a room with other advisors with the same client. I've done it a number of different times, and it's been really rewarding for everybody because we end up building on each other's good ideas and helping the owner think far more creatively than they could think themselves. That's where it comes from. These are not my ideas. These are sitting in on meetings with other people and doing research on, creative ways to think about things so that owners can get new and fresh perspective.
Thank you. That's great.
Other ideas or questions?
Got one more. What ideas do you have for new employees going straight to virtual work?
Yeah, that's really tough. First of all, I think if an owner has hired somebody that's going to be in that situation, I think they need to have a very well-defined role description and very well-defined development onboarding plan. And a couple of things that are really important to include in that onboarding plan are they need to have clarity on what the specific work is and how they're going to learn and understand that work. So who do they need to learn from that they can get one-on-one with virtually, of course. And what are the deliverables of that work? So what does success look like and what are the criteria around that? And then the second piece that's super important is what are the most important relationships for them to build? Because what gets the short shrift oftentimes in the work from home or virtual work environment is the relationship struggle. They suffer. Well, somebody new coming in has no relationships. And so, I'm pulling from my P&G days, even though we did not work virtually ever. But one of the things that we did early on in an onboarding process, which I think has great direct reapplication, is that we had a list of the critical people that we had to have rock solid relationships with, and then a secondary list of people that would be really healthy for us to get to know better. And we would encourage them, and it would be expected of those other relationships that we would be spending time with them, and we would have relationship building time to get to know the person, but we would also have relationship building time to, obviously learn the work. And so that time spent on getting to know the person was as important early on as was getting to know the work. And if they do those things well, then at least they get that launch in, and they have structure to their days. So my philosophy is when someone starts working, their onboarding plan should be designed by the company, by their manager, heavily for the first 2 weeks. And then it starts to ramp down where the new employee starts to command more of ownership of their schedule. And then maybe by week 4 or 6, it depends, of course, on the role, then they start taking over their schedule. But those first couple of weeks are very detailed about where they're going to spend their time and what they're going to do.
All right. Any final follow-up questions for Abby? All right. Well, Abby, thank you so much. That was an excellent presentation. Everything that you mentioned today, I've started to see glimpses of that in companies where I live, people who've been adapting, and you notice, and those are the companies that stand out. And they're the ones that you think of when, that company used to be a restaurant, now they're a food delivery service. When they're back to being more of a restaurant, it's probably a place I'm going to frequent more often. I put up on the screen our upcoming events. We're taking a break through the December holidays. We're back in January with 4 consecutive meetings, one each month, with our platinum sponsor firms being the feature presenter. So we've got Gianmarco, then Cousins Lansky in February, Mass Mutual Great Lakes in March, and the AR Law Firm in April. So we're looking forward to a great 2021. We're going to continue virtually as long as we have to. We will one day be meeting again. Abby, thank you again. Thanks for everyone who attended today. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone next week, and safe and happy holidays in December as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And Chris Wolf will be sending out Abby's presentation to all our attendees today.
Thank you.